please say so. Could somebody just let me know once again if you can see me okay, hear me okay, and see the slides? Yeah,
Yeah.
thumbs up.
Yep.
Perfect. Good. Right. Then let's get cracking. So, presentation for the BeFit team about eating well this winter, eating healthily on a budget. First things first, who am I? I'm a nutrition coach, and that basically means my job is to help normal people like yourselves implement good nutrition into their lives, and I would say without completely turning their lifestyle upside down. I'm a personal trainer, fitness coach. I work at a local gym here. Play cricket. I love coffee. I do skiing and most recently strongman. I'm doing Movember, which is why I've got much better beard in this photo than I do right now, but it's all for a wonderful cause. So, what we're going to cover today. First things first, what should we even look for in a healthy, balanced meal? Then we're going to talk about the biggest bang for your buck ingredients that you can add into your next shopping list. So how to save money but still nourish yourself with cheap, wholesome ingredients. Talk a little bit about cooking techniques that not only save time but save a little bit of energy. Obviously, energy bills are quite high at the moment. That's really important for a lot of us. And give a few little tips and tricks around that. Last little bit I'm going to do is a live demo of how to use the BBC Good Food website to find tasty meals, and then perhaps to tailor those a little bit to your goals. I say it's live. I've pre-recorded it so I don't have to mess around with screen sharing, but we might have a little bit of time to dive into some other concepts using the website if we want to. In all of my talks, I try and leave plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. There's no silly questions. Please feel free to ask away. Either pop them in the chat as we go along, stick your hand up, interrupt me. I don't mind what we do, but we've got plenty of time at the back end of this to have that Q&A because, as I said, it's all about me helping you implement it to your lifestyle. So the principles are relatively simple once you understand them, but how that applies to you and your own particular challenges is the most important bit, and that can only really happen. We can only really solve that through having a conversation. So, first things first, what are the basics to look for when we are choosing a meal if we want to optimize our health? This is a really, really simple concept. It's very basic. So when things are quite basic, they tend to have less flexibility, but it gives you a good starting point. And we're going to talk about how we can tailor this general concept. Things we should think about, if we imagine this is our dinner plate. On that plate, we're going to look to get about a quarter of that plate is going to be a portion of protein. That can be beans, pulses, fish, eggs, meat, tofu, corn, the other types of vegan sources of protein that we can think of. When we're planning a meal, I would always say look for that element first and plan the rest of your meal around that. That tends to be the most challenging for the majority of people to have an ample amount of that. Why do we need protein on the plate? Well, we'll come on to that in a bit, but it's going to keep us feeling fuller for longer. That means we don't need to eat as much food. If we're not eating as much food, we're not spending as much money on it, and we're not at the risk of overeating. It's really important for hormonal function as well, for keeping us strong and healthy, and we'll talk about that in a while. I would then go almost anti-clockwise around the plate. Can I get half of that plate is going to be fruits and vegetables, so that we're nourishing ourselves, giving ourselves all the vitamins and minerals that we need. This is for, a general population. If we maybe walk the dog a few times a week, we might do a little bit of exercise, but we don't have a specific training goal. If we've got more energy out, we might look to eat more carbohydrates on our plate. But for most people, this is going to give us a balanced plate of food. With that in mind, carbohydrates are things like potatoes, oats, cereals, rice, pasta. That's going to make up roughly a quarter of our plate. If we're really athletic and we do a lot of sport, do a lot of exercise, we might shift that to being half of our plate. So the carbohydrates kind of go up as we burn more energy. Finally, fat is on our plate. Fat is essential for health. We would literally die if we had a zero fat diet. So we must have some in there. Things like oils, butter, cheese and nuts. What we'll see is it's a small dot in the middle of the plate. We might get some fat from our protein sources. We might get some fat from our carb sources. We might get some fat because we put butter on our peas. That's all good. We just need to be mindful that we don't need an awful lot. That's kind of like about 1 to 2 thumb-sized portions of fat on our plate. Things like oils, butters, cheese, nuts, avocado. General concept. If we think, what would an athlete eat stereotypically? If we think about what they might eat and be healthy, it's not going to look a long way away from this type of plate. Orders of priority. The foods we pick do matter. We can have a lot of control about our health and nutrition by just the choices we make with the foods. Portion sizes really count. Portion sizes are calories. Those are pretty much interchangeable. I put portion sizes first because if you do this portion sizing, your calories are going to pretty much look after themselves. And then the next layer of the pyramid, if you like, is making sure we've got ample protein in our diet. After that, the ratio of fats to carbohydrates don't really matter too much, but that's because we've already thought about calories. We've already thought about portions by structuring it in this way. I say that as well because lots of fear mongering about carbohydrates, lots of fear mongering about fat, even fear mongering about protein. Ultimately, in any diet, whether it's a performance diet, a health diet, a fat loss diet, calories are the thing that underpins everything. If they're in control, you're probably going to be okay. Different way to think about this portion control. I alluded to it with the fats here, but if we are, for whatever reason, we don't get on with the plate concept, we can think about having 1 to 2 palm-sized portions of protein each meal, 2 to 3 fists full of vegetables, cupped handful of carbohydrates, 1 to 2 cupped handfuls of carbohydrates, 1 to 2 thumb portions of fats. If you need more fuel, if you're bigger, if you're more energetic, you could be towards the top end of those ranges. If you move less in the day, you're a little bit smaller, towards the bottom end of those ranges is fine. Really simple 2 concepts to think about without worrying too much about calories and too much about detail. As alluded to earlier, the same principles apply. If you train hard, you go to the gym often, you run, cycle a lot, you've got other athletic ambitions, just bring up that carbohydrate portion. Yeah, we do kind of reduce the fruits and vegetables on that plate, but that doesn't mean we can't have an extra few on the side. The important concept is the carbohydrates increase as we require more fuel, because carbohydrates give us fuel for explosive movements. They also fuel our brain, which is why we don't have 0 carbohydrates either. You could technically get away with that, it's just not optimal. A little bit about protein, because I've stressed the point that it should be almost the cornerstone of our nutrition. Protein is for every single one of us. It's not just about building muscles, going to the gym and pumping iron and looking like a bodybuilder. But muscle is really, really important for our health. As we get older, as we move into old age and retirement, if we have more muscle available, we're less susceptible to age-related muscle wastage. We stay stronger for longer. Ultimately, we're more able to get up and down off the loo without the assistance of anyone else for as long as possible. So it's all about quality of life. You can do a lot. It's never too late to start, but optimizing protein in your diet is going to make sure your muscles are strong, your bones are strong. It's going to make sure you're less frail in every aspect of your life, especially as we age, because it's the building block of every cell in your body. Hair, skin, nails, teeth, muscle, responsible for creating hormones. We cannot live without it, and we can only get it from our food. Typical sources we've already talked about: meats, fish, but we've got things like nuts have trace sources, although they're a bit more of a fat source. Pulses and beans are a great source, nice and high in fiber. Dairy products. Got broccoli in the photo. You're going to need to eat a lot of broccoli to get protein from it, but it just illustrates the point that it's in a variety of things. Talks about if we are trying to control our appetite, really, really helpful for keeping us full. Fiber is also really, really helpful for keeping us full. That's why we have plenty of vegetables on our plate. Protein, if you exercise, also aids your recovery. It doesn't just aid your recovery from being in the gym and lifting weights. It aids your recovery from a boot camp, a sports class, even if you cycle or run at the weekend, do those type of endurance activities. If you're cycling, you're turning the pedals thousands and thousands of times and using your muscles thousands and thousands of times. You are doing a very light, high repetition version of weight training. Protein is really important component of that. It's not just all about carbs if you do endurance sport. Talked about the structure of a healthy plate of food. Just check that no one's got any questions. No, good. We talked a little bit about that structure and what it looks like. Luckily, you can see I've got a few veg on my plate in the background there. That's not the only piece of the puzzle. It's probably the biggest piece of the puzzle to get right. But these things on the slide here are going to help a little bit with how to apply that. So if we struggle with overeating, and not everybody does, slowing down the pace of your eating is going to really help, because it takes around 20 minutes for your body's satiety signals to kick in. And satiety is, am I feeling full now? It takes 20 minutes to realize you're full. So if we can slow down the pace of eating and try not to eat in a distracted environment where the telly's on or we're doing work on our laptop and stuff like that, it's going to help us feel fuller for longer. And if you struggle a lot with hunger and you've done the stuff on the plate that we've already talked about, that's probably the next biggest rock to move. 20 minutes sounds really intimidating. If you eat your meal in literally 2 minutes, let's try and get to 5. Let's chip away at that in slow increments. Things that might help are to put your cutlery down between bites, to try and spark up a conversation. Maybe if you live alone, that's not possible, but what I used to like to do when I lived alone was I have the television on but have my back to it, so I had some sort of company from the sound, but I wasn't engaged in watching the thing, and I just have something familiar on in the background that I could just listen to. Other tips to think about: the 80-20 rule, which is basically saying if I do stuff right, in inverted commas, for 80% of the time, the other 20% of the time, I can do what I like and I'll still reach that same goal of health. There are a lot of statistics from national health agencies all around the world that would say 20% of your calories can come from sugar, McDonald's, milkshakes, and you're going to be okay provided the other 80% is nourishing and wholesome, which is what we've already talked about how to do that. And that's saying don't be too black and white with things. You can have a little bit of what you fancy and still be healthy. You don't need to eat minimally processed foods all of the time. Are minimally processed foods more healthful? Yes, but sugar, cake, chocolate, crisps all have a part in our lifestyle, in our diet. Do not be afraid of them, just be aware of them and the calories that they contribute to your diet and the lower level of nutrition that they might have. So with that in mind, some of you might, if you want to know more about nutrition, it can be a really good activity to just spend a month just finding out a little bit about calories. We'll use this concept of calories a little bit like stabilizers on a bike. When a child learns to ride their bike, they're not on both wheels normally straight away. They've either got a little balance bike or they've got stabilizers on the back that just helps them to figure out what's going on and to learn the process. They don't go straight off to downhill mountain biking from not being able to ride a bike. They take it in small steps. Calories can be really educational. Reading food labels, checking out portion sizes on the back of them, give us a lot of knowledge and help us to really understand food and realize that something like a snack size Mars bar is 100 calories and so is a banana. Right, those both give the same calorie contribution to our diet. Obviously a banana has more nutrition in it, but they both have a place in our diet. And calories can be a really useful educational tool. Food labeling, calorie tracking apps can also tell us how much protein is in our food and help us with that concept of getting a quarter of our plate with protein on it. Pick filling foods if you struggle with hunger. If you don't struggle with hunger, pick less filling foods if you need the extra fuel, because sometimes if we need a lot of fuel, some people's appetites don't allow that to happen and they underfuel. We often think if we're underfueling, can't eat enough, just flip the script on fat loss and say, what would I do opposite if I wasn't trying to lose fat? Final tip, and possibly the most important one, is to do a bit of planning around our meals, which is what this plate portion sizes we've talked about, what I'll talk about using the BBC website is really going to help us with. Final little bit on nutrition, just some more basics. On the left here is what I say priorities for health when it comes to your diet. Number one, pick foods that you like, literally anything. If it's your favourite food, it should be in your diet. Because to be healthy, we need to be consistent. That runs through the whole pyramid. And if you're not picking foods that you enjoy, if you're putting your favourite foods on the banned list, you're never going to be consistent. So the rest of this literally doesn't matter. This is the foundation before we get to calories, which I've already talked about as being the most important variable, and protein. If we get those things right, you're going to be consistent. You're going to have success, whatever your endeavour, whether that's health, fat loss, or performance. Carbs and fats do matter, but they're kind of like the icing on the cake. And by controlling them, you're not necessarily going to be any more consistent. All I would say is if you've got a lot of athletic ambition, make sure your diet is carb heavy. If you haven't, it doesn't really matter what the ratio of fats and carbohydrates in your diet are. That can be quite broad because we're going to be mindful of calories and we're going to be mindful of protein, even if we're just using that plate portion as the concept. Other concepts to just quickly go through, because I like to do these things because it helps to demystify nutrition a little bit, and there's a lot of nonsense information out there. So how does your metabolism work? Now, metabolism is all of the processes in your body that use energy. Most of us think of metabolism as how many calories do I burn in a day, is what we're talking about. So most of your metabolism is made up by your size, how tall you are predominantly, and how much you weigh. 70% of our energy needs are going to be determined by that. So the calories that you require to stay the same per day is basically dictated by your size. That's why if there's a lady who's 5'2" and her partner is 6'4", their partner is going to need more fuel, basically, because they're bigger. Our food choices make a little bit of difference. So if we have a high protein diet, it takes our body a bit longer to break down protein. If we have a high fiber diet, it takes our body a bit longer to break that down, and we don't quite use as much of the energy from that. So that also contributes to our net calories in and out, because a high protein diet is going to mean we burn a few extra calories, but it's not a big deal in terms of the bigger picture. The biggest variability between people, we'll probably know someone who's lean and stays lean without really thinking about it, is the amount that they move around outside of regular exercise. The amount they fidget, the amount they wave their hands around, the step count kind of in a day, if they stand up for work, if they're more likely to take the stairs, if they're more likely to park further away from work. That you can kind of influence, but most of it's subconscious. But that explains why some people have a different calorie need, despite the fact they're the same size. Final point, exercise typically makes up around 5% of your calorie burn. So exercise is incredible for your health, and possibly the biggest thing you can do for your health is to move daily, get a little bit of a sweat on, do a little weight bearing exercise. But if you're looking to control your calories in versus calories out through exercise, it's very, very difficult. I can just about do that, but I'm a personal trainer who works a 6-day week, who does 16,000 steps a day on average and picks up weights for people all day long. But I'm not in the norm. You guys are in the norm. Exercise is a very difficult way to offset our calories in versus calories out. I talked a little about satiety, aka how to be less hungry. Foods that tend to be filling: potatoes, porridge, apples, beef, grapes, cheese, lentils. Cheese is high in calories, but it's actually quite hard to eat a lot of it, so you should be mindful of that as a portion size. Foods that are less filling, things like sugar puffs, biscuits, cornflakes, Special K, white bread compared to brown bread because it has less fibre, crisps, peanuts, donuts, croissants. These things aren't bad, they're just, if we're hungry all the time, it's going to be hard to be at the right level of calories by having these types of foods. It's going to be easier to be at the right level of calories by having these types of foods, because they're going to fill you up for longer, they're going to nourish you more. So when we're looking to save a little bit of money, we don't necessarily want to be eating massive portions of everything. These foods are not only going to be healthful, they're going to mean we need smaller portions of stuff, and they tend to be relatively cheap as well. So with that in mind, let's talk about some bang for your buck ingredients the next time you go shopping. Protein is the most expensive part of your plate generally. So look to either swap it out for things like lentils and beans, or what I like to do is simply enrich that. So if I'm going to make a bolognese, I might use some beef mince, but I might also use some lentils, so that I'm still getting the protein content from the lentils, but I'm sort of bulking the meal out. That's quite a traditional thing to do, to stretch the meals out. It's a very sort of Italian way of thinking about it, European way of thinking about it, but that's going to help. So there's one quick and easy win. Maybe like if we're eating a can of soup, it's going to be quite low in protein. We could add some butter beans to that, which is going to make it a really nice filling meal. Talked about satiety and fillingness. Veg is filling and cheap. Eat plenty of it. Eat the veg that you like. Try to have a variety. And try to have it in different ways. Frozen veg, canned fruits and vegetables are cheaper, a longer life. Just be aware with the canned stuff, look out for added salt and syrups. It should tell you on the labels whether it's in water, whether it's got added salt. Try and have it just in normal water. That's going to mean that you're not eating too much salt. The syrups bring with them calories. But syrup might have sugar in it. Sugar isn't necessarily the problem. It's the calories that it contributes for. Little extra nutrition. Another great store cupboard staple, things like porridge oats or buying larger bags of rice and pasta. One thing that's been mega noticeable since COVID is you never used to be able to buy like a sack of pasta in the supermarkets, but you can now. And although it's more of an outlay at the point of purchase, they're so much cheaper per 100 grams than the smaller packets. Less waste, they're going to store forever. It's a really cheap, wholesome ingredient. Final one, potatoes were on that satiety index as being really filling, really high satiety. They're cheap, nutritious and filling, very helpful. White potatoes, sweet potatoes, doesn't really matter. Very helpful for you. They become less filling when you deep fry them, cover them in salt and make them really, really tasty. So chips and crisps are less filling, but they're still potato based. If we have a jacket potato, inevitably that's going to be more helpful than having some fried chips or some crisps. But again, the 80-20 rule matters. Time savers. So time and money savers, in fact. So biggest tip, make some leftovers. If you've got the oven on, utilize that. I listened a few years ago to a podcast, nutrition podcast. I had a chef on there. He said, look, in my restaurant, I've got a rule. If the oven's on, something's on every single shelf because I'm paying energy bills for that. It's my time. I'm going to make sure that I use that time wisely. So think about it like if, we're making an evening meal, we've got a little bit of, a couple of chicken legs in the oven, maybe we're baking a potato at the same time. What are we doing on the other shelf for that oven? Could we have 4 chicken legs in the oven so that we've got 2 for leftovers? Could we have a big tray of roasted vegetables and a little bit of olive oil so that, again, we've got some veg to go alongside the meal that we're eating there and then, but we've got a super simple lunch for tomorrow because we've got all that stuff ready cooked in the fridge, grab and go. Don't need to meal prep anything, don't need to plan, don't need to buy stuff when we get to work. Other things that are going to save you time and money, have a look for some, firstly, if you can, make some homemade frozen ready meals. Let's say you've made a big lasagna. That's going to freeze up quite nicely. Cottage pie will do the same, bolognese, whether you make that with lentils or whether you make that with corn mince or mince. What can we do to make make things easier and cheaper? We can batch cook things. We can use our freezer to then utilize them throughout the weeks and following months. One of my favorites at home, we've got a pressure cooker, relatively cheap. You'd only ever need to buy one. You literally just need to replace the gasket now and then. They're really safe because they all have to be CE marked, or they're probably UKCA marked now. So they're really safe, very hard to hurt yourself on, which they didn't used to be back in the day. basically reduces the cooking time of things drastically because you're using the pressure, you're trapping all the steam in there. So then you can cook things like dry lentils really, really quickly. You don't necessarily need to soak them overnight. They're going to take hours, maybe an hour versus 10 hours. That frees up so many different options, even like cheaper cuts of meat. So things like shin of beef, you have to cook for ages to get it to be edible, but it's really, really cheap. Get it in the pressure cooker. You can probably do it in 45 minutes, have this really nice shin of beef curry, or use it to make pulled beef, whatever. It's just going to reduce cooking time drastically. It's a very robust, cheap piece of equipment. Final bit, I did a bit of research because I just wanted to fact check myself, but microwaves, slow cookers and air fryers are all energy efficient according to EDF Energy. And they quote a stat that cooking a potato in a conventional oven will use up to 10 times as much energy as a microwave. Just my little tip on that, which I picked up from my wife, if we are going to do a baked potato, cook it in the microwave, get it nice and soft, and then you can just pop it in to crisp up in the oven for maybe 15 minutes on a high heat, rather than having it in there for like 2 hours. So just a bunch of different concepts of how to save a little bit of money, save a little bit of time with the way that we cook our foods. With that in mind, I've talked for 25 minutes now. So if anybody's got any questions, please feel free to ask, stick your hand up, write them in the chat, unmute yourself, have a chat. Also, if anybody has got anything to add to that, then love to hear from you, because I'm by no means an expert. How healthy is corn, says Rachel, as a meat alternative? Is it a fairly simple food or quite processed and artificial? Corn is basically a form, as I understand it, like a form of mushroom. It's they call it phycoprotein or something. That might be wrong. It is processed, but so is a loaf of bread. So is a pint of milk. It's been pasteurized. It's going to be absolutely fine, because if you don't eat a lot of meat, it's going to enrich that protein level. Ultimately, when we eat anything, our body breaks it all down into the simplest possible components. So our body probably doesn't know any different. One of the biggest things we need to think about is variety in our diet. So should we eat corn as our only source of protein? No. But can it be contributory to that? Absolutely, especially if you don't eat very much meat. Does that answer your question, Rachel?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
It's just because some of the substitutes, you look at them and you think, well, that's just all chemicals. I don't really, you're just better off sticking with simple vegetables. Not that I don't eat meat at all, I'm just cutting back a little bit.
No, fine.
But yeah, some of the alternatives do just look sort of a bit not really food, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, there has been a little bit of fear-mongering about chemicals. Like what we have to consider is, what is the chemical and what does that do? It can sound quite scary to say chemicals, but salt is a chemical. We need that for life. Water is a chemical. We need that for life. If something's been messed around with loads and loads, yeah, it's probably not going to be incredible. But again, the 80-20 rule tells us that we don't need to worry too much. And let's say, is it better to have a corn thing that you've prepared at home because it's quick and convenient versus dialing in a takeaway pizza? Like, we've got to give it a little bit of concept around that. But as you say, loads of veg on that plate is one of the biggest things we can do, because then it almost offsets a little bit all the other things that we like to indulge in.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to answer. Amy's got a hand up, so I'll answer Amy's one first, and then there's got a couple more.
Thank you. Yeah, mine's about sort of meal prep. So yeah. I love a good batch cook. I love putting stuff in my freezer. I do that already, but I hear quite a lot about people like doing meal prep stuff. So you mentioned putting like extra chicken into ovens and stuff like that, and things like overnight oats. So I always try and do that. But how long would you store it for? Because I never like to, like, if it's overnight oats, I would only ever do the next breakfast. Or if I've got like cold chicken in the fridge, I'd always eat it within 2 days. But you hear people of doing like the week's meal prep at the weekend. Yeah, and I don't know if I'm comfy with that. What's your view on it?
Just be careful with it. I think using your nose is a good test of like, is it worth eating? I think actually, if It's either M&S or Waitrose. If you Google it, they've got some quite good advice about food storage in terms of that. What I like to think of is have ingredients ready in the fridge and then put them together. I don't particularly like, some people love to batch cook all their meals up front. If I did that, I would try and freeze some of them so then I don't need to worry about it as much.
Yeah. What about like overnight oats? Would you just make that the night before, or would you do a couple at a time?
Well, let's see what's in the oats. We've got oats. Oats, some sort of milk. I think it's going to keep, to be honest, I think it's going to keep as long as the milk would.
So if the milk's fresh, you're probably good for a couple of days.
I would have thought so, yeah. I mean, that's my educated guess. I don't know that's a fact, but I think that's going to be okay.
Yeah, I feel like maybe I'm sometimes overcautious and then can't be as organised as I'd like to be, but I don't want to poison everyone.
No, of course, yeah. Again, like I think like use your nose, use your taste buds as well. Like food labelling has to have like best before dates and expiry dates, but we know there's a little bit of sort of fat built into that as well. So
yeah.
Okay.
No, it's helpful. Thank you.
Nina says smart lid 15 in one saves so much time for me. Yeah, great tip. All those little sort of devices. And yeah, Grizz is saying, how bad is processed food? I don't have a lot of time for food prep. So there's a lot in the media at the minute about various different nutrition, like I'll use professionals in inverted commas. Don't be scared of it. Like food is broken down into its constituents. If you don't have much time, it's better to eat something that is rich in protein and appropriate in calories than it is to go gorge yourself, end up having like Mars bars and like get close to the concepts that we've discussed already, and you're going to be okay. The 80-20 rule always counts. Your body breaks everything down into its individual constituents. It doesn't really know. People talk about like inflammation a lot because of processed foods. Every single food is processed. Don't panic. Inflammation comes from a bunch of things. It comes from stress, comes from all sorts of things that might not be anything to do with food. So I would just caution, please do not be scared of convenience. If it allows you to eat an appropriate amount of calories, try and find ways to get extra fruit and veg in your diet to offset that. You've got Sarah's just put a link in the chat. Don't know what that one is. Little Google search, I think. Let's see what. How long do overnight oats last? There we go. We've got the answer. Google's our friend. Right. Says we can keep overnight oats for up to 5 days. Perfect. That seems to make sense to me. Right. Okay. I'm going to move on if no one's got any more questions for now. We've got time at the end for some more as well. Here we go. So before we go into that, I'll send out the presentation slides afterwards, and the next page is a full screen version of this little video, which I will play, and hopefully the sound will play. If not, it's got some captions and I'll overdub it. So I'm going to show you in this video, which I'll bring up full screen, and the link to the Good Food website is here. There are a bunch of filters that you can use to start to find recipes. I then look for something that is in between 500 and 700 calories, has 20 or more grams of protein. That's going to get me somewhere close to the description of the plate thing that we saw earlier. And regardless of what the recipe says, that doesn't mean I can't have a side of peas, broccoli, sweet corn, whatever I fancy as a vegetable to further enrich that. I don't think that recipe is locked in and fixed. It's not baking, it's cooking, and it doesn't need to be as scientific for it to work. Right, so I'm going to go to the next slide. I'll play it quickly. Can someone just give me a thumbs up in the chat if they can hear? If they can't, I will... we'll have to rely on the captions, I think. So here we go. I'm here on the BBC Good Food website, and I'm going to show you how to get some recipe inspiration to build a nice, healthy, balanced meal. What I'm going to do is go to the Health tab, and I'm going to go and find high protein. I'm going to go click on that. It's going to give me a bunch of options. I'm just going to use one as an example here. So I'm going to go for this Mexican chicken stew. Click on that. Now, what I am looking for is, per portion, I want it to be between 500 and 700 calories. And I want it to have more than 20 grams of protein. So because I've picked high protein recipes, the protein amount is above that, it's 33 grams. What I'll spot is the calories are actually a bit lower than that target. I want it to be nice and filling. So what we could do is simply add a slice of bread to that, or maybe 40 grams of rice, weighed dry, boiled up per portion. That's going to bring that number up to around 500 calories. If you're more active, eat a little bit more, add more rice, add more bread. We want carbs in the diet when we're more active because it's going to allow us to perform better. Hope that little tip helps. If you've got any questions, let me know. Right, so like mega quick run through of there, but basically on that Good Food website, let's go back to it. I'm here on the BBC. You've got along the top tab, bunch of ways to find recipes. You've got family recipes, healthy recipes. I went into the recipe bits, high protein. You can search by ingredient, inspiration. It's an incredible resource. The magazines are quite good, but they've basically got all of the stuff on here for free. So if you do a little bit of digging, you'll definitely be able to find what you want. Even if you just got a bunch of stuff in the store cupboard that you want to use up, you're going to be able to find a way to do that on here. One bit with the nutritional information. Where is it? There. They also give you, they're very in-depth. They're very good with their nutritional information. You get also the amount of fiber that's in the diet. So if you're looking for more filling meals, try and get that fiber number up. Don't go mental with the fiber because it's going to upset your tummy if you ramp it from 0 to 100 in one go. But if you notice that you're generally lower in fiber with your meal choices, try and add a bit more veg. Try and pick those foods that have a little bit more. It's fantastic for your health. Again, many processed foods are lower in fiber, but that doesn't mean we can't balance that out by maybe having a pizza with a side salad, for example, to kind of pimp up. Louise says she's made the Mexican stew. It's really tasty. Brilliant. Good. I'm glad that was a good one to pick. So hopefully that concept makes sense. Go away, have a little play. I'm going to send the slides out anyway, and it's got all my email addresses and stuff in there. So if you try it for yourself and you've got any questions, please send me an email. I'll see what I can do to help you if you've got any questions or you're stuck with anything. I'm not going to go through these, but Amy just asked me to add a few different meal ideas for you guys. So I'll get Amy to send the slides out. These recipes are going to be in here. So we've already talked a bit about overnight oats. So here's one idea for a breakfast. Obviously overnight oats require a bit of prep in the evening before, but if we can find 5, 10, 15 minutes in the evening to do some sort of food prep, even if it's just decide what we're going to buy when we get to work, then we're making that next day easier. And once we get in the habit, life then tends to become a little bit easier around food. Obviously, if we're planning our foods out in advance, we're not buying stuff at a premium from local outlets and the costs go down. Got a nice little, I'd say this is probably like either a work from home lunch or like a weekend lunch. We've got spicy Moroccan eggs. So again, eggs really cheap, nice source of protein, a little bit of fat. And then we've got a few chickpeas to kind of bulk it out, add some more fiber, protein and carbs, and really healthful plate of food for not a lot of money. Again, these slides will be out so you can read through those recipes and try them for yourself. And again, maybe an evening meal, a bit of a curry. So this hasn't got any meat in it, but we've got butternut squash, which is really, really filling, nutritious, wholesome, quite low in calories. Loads of different store cupboard ingredients, and we're using lentils as our protein source, which is really going to bulk it out. Does that mean you can't include some chicken in there? No, it doesn't. You can play around with that. If we stick some chicken or corn or tofu or something in there, that's going to bring up that protein content of the recipe. We see it's already quite low in calories, so we've got plenty of wiggle room, nice and high in fiber, not too much fat, not too many carbs. I don't think this recipe includes, it does include the naan bread. So yeah, really low calorie. Again, like things like naan bread you can buy in the supermarket, they can stay in the freezer and you just pop them in the toaster just to get them defrosted and you've got a nice quick and easy meal. This would freeze up really, really well in the freezer as well and give you like a nice homemade ready meal if you wanted to do that. Got another question from Jill, which I'll answer now. I'll leave that on the screen. Jill's asking, is almond, oat milk, etc. better for you than normal semi-skim milk? Great question. Better is relative. If you are lactose intolerant, it probably is going to be better for you because you can't handle the lactose in dairy. With the plant alternatives, read the labels. Where dairy has a different nutritional profile to plant milks is that it has calcium and B vitamins in it naturally. Many of I think like the Healthily oat milks, like the better quality ones, tend to have been enriched with the stuff that is missing from dairy, which is normally calcium. And in our normal diets here in the UK, we're going to get the majority of our calcium from dairy. It is present in plant foods in very small amounts, which is hard to digest. So if we don't eat dairy, I would look for fortified plant milk alternative that's got the calcium put back in there, or I'd look to take a calcium supplement because you're probably going to be too low in calcium. How many calories per meal is reasonable? It's a great question. So not too few, because we're going to end up overeating later down the line. I quite like to think about, and this works pretty well with most of my clients of all different shapes and sizes, having a baseline of about 500 calories per meal. That's going to be 1,500 calories a day, which isn't a lot. Most people are going to need more than that, especially to maintain their size. But then we've got 3 solid meals of a reasonable amount of calories, 500, 500, 500. We might then have 500 calories worth of snacks. That's like 2,000 calories a day. That's going to be most people around about maintenance, but some people are going to be underneath that and not maintaining their size and maybe gaining a little bit of weight at 2,000, which means their snacks need to be smaller. The problem is if we go looking for too many meals that are like 250 calories, we're just eating fresh air and we're more likely to overeat later on. If you are bigger, more active, more muscular, you're going to need more, which is why on the slides I put 500 to 700 as like a rule of thumb. On the next slide, I've got a little link to a calorie calculator where you go find out how many you need a day. That's then going to give you a clue to how many calories per meal is reasonable for you, because you're just going to divide that up by the amount of times you eat per day. Does that help, Grizz? Does that answer what you were?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Again, you'll get the slides here. So I'm a nutrition coach as well as a fitness coach. If any of you want any help, feel free to email me. I do personal coaching if you want the help with that, but hopefully you won't need it because you found this presentation wonderfully helpful and it's answered the questions around how to eat healthily on a budget. With that in mind though, we're going to go on to the Q&A section, which we've already had loads of great questions, but please feel free. I'm going to open up the floor. I'm going to stop talking. You guys either tell me what you felt really helped you today. If I confuse you in any way, we'll try and solve that. If you've got a particular question, let me know. Ooh. Louise says, I'm most hungry when I get home from work. What are some good healthy snacks before tea is ready? Best healthy snack you can have is probably a piece of fruit. High in fibre, nice and filling, low in calorie, nourishing. Sometimes the hunger aspect of when we get home, provided we've had some balanced meals throughout the day, is actually a bit of a habit. So we walk in the door, we hang up our coat, and then we go have a snack, and our brain has kind of learnt that when we hang up the snack, when we hang up the coat, we get this nice reward from having a snack. So it preempts it by then going, oh, I'm hungry, I need that snack. So great idea to snack if it's going to make you overeat before tea's ready, but it's not necessarily required unless you're going to be so hungry you can't think, which is then why I say a piece of fruit, because if a piece of fruit won't do, that craving is probably more than just hunger. Other things there, you could have a very small portion of nuts, maybe some people like a few frozen grapes, olives, just stuff to just graze on and keep you going, rather than thinking that we need to snack all of the time. Does that help, Louise, or are you looking for something more substantial?
No, it does. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Anybody got anything else at type 2? Right, so Grizz, you're type 2 diabetic. Will this change anything on nutrition on what I've learned today? No, actually. One of the more important things is calorie control. Are you medicating, Grizz, or?
Yes, it's controlled by medication.
Okay, so then it does. You've got to be aware a little bit of your carb intake, and then the amount of insulin you take alongside that. If you're taking insulin, you won't be metformin, but you just got to be aware of the reaction you have, and then be prepared to deal with that as appropriate. So if your glucose levels change, it is all about awareness. But this is still a healthy, balanced plate of food for someone living with diabetes. Do you need a little bit more planning? Do you need to be a little bit more prepared? Yes, you do. But this is what your medical team would recommend to you, unless they've specifically told you to be on a much lower carbohydrate diet. But this is still pretty much close to that level. One of the problems you might get is if you start eating these things in isolation. So you just have a piece of bread, you just have a piece of fruit. That's going to have a different glucose spike for you, and you might need to deal with that differently with your medication. If you've got this nice balanced plate of food, that's going to slow down that spike, blend out that spike a little bit, and give you a little bit more better insulin control by having this balanced plate of food. The rest of us don't need to worry about insulin, by the way. It's only if you have a problem with it that it becomes important. But this concept is going to really balance that out, and is going to be the most helpful way of managing that diabetes in combination with your medical team and the drugs they're advising you to use.
Cheers, thank you.
Okay. If you have any more questions on that, I can help you a little bit, Grizz, so feel free to email me. So we've got Louise, what's your view on protein powders? Are they only good if you are weight training? No, they're not. They're just they're a supplement to your diet. If you can't get enough of this, they're a perfectly reasonable way to make that up. They're really, really cheap. So again, if we're talking about cost perspective, which is a big element of this talk, they're going to be a fantastic option. Dairy one's going to have calcium in it. It's basically baby formula. We give that to a baby to help them grow. It's the same for us. It's just a different version. It's not quite as filling as eating a chicken breast, not quite as filling as a big plate full of lentils, but it's cheap, easy and convenient, and there's no reason not to eat them. They're not just for people who weight train. I do a lot of running. Should I be supplementing my diet with anything to look after my joints and muscles, etc.? So if we're not getting enough protein, then I would supplement with that. Joints, muscles, you could think about, if we don't eat lots of oily fish, we might want to take a omega-3 supplement. You could think about things like curcumin. Some benefits to that as a supplement in the research, not crystal clear. One of the things with supplements is, am I already getting that thing in my diet? If you are, you don't need a supplement. Can I afford it? If you can't, don't buy it. And if you can afford it and you want to give it a try, then give it a try. One of the best places to look for advice on supplements is the website examine.com. I'll pop that in the chat. That's going to tell you where you get there. It's going to tell you all about supplements, what it does, what the risks, what the benefits are, what food sources you would get it in, what the recommended daily amounts are. You can go in there and just find out. You could also use the Chronometer app. If you're worried that you are deficient in a particular thing, spend 3 days max just tracking everything in brutal detail. Every single pea you eat, every single leaf of spinach. It's then going to tell you what a normal, where all your micronutrient levels are at. and then you can spot some gaps and go and fill them in with either changing what you eat or supplementing. So I'll put those in the chat now, and we'll go chronometer. I do it. So Rachel, so would protein powders be good for elderly and frail people with very small appetites? Yes, they would in a way, but I would say go to Boots and buy Compede, which is a meal replacement shake, which has a combination of the protein powder plus carbohydrates and is kind of like they're either 300 or 500 calories a serving. So my dad is quite frail. He's got COPD, which affects his breathing. He can't eat a lot all of the time. And my mum gives him Compede when he can't stomach eating anything, as basically a full meal replacement. It's enriched with vitamins and things. I would say Compede versus just a protein shake, because the protein shake is just going to give them the protein, which is important. But if they could get the full meal profile in there, and they're relatively tasty, they're not going to fill them up too much. So that would be my recommendation there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no worries. Right, I think we are just about time. We've got 5 minutes. I'm willing to finish early and let you guys go and get your morning coffee. But if anyone's got any more questions, now's your chance. Oh, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, glad you enjoyed it. Okay, so what I will do, I've recorded the presentation. I'll get that link uploaded. I'll get Amy to send out the link and the slides so you guys can watch it back. I think for the workshop guys, I don't remember who contacted me, but what I'll try and do is make a little poster with a QR code so the guys and girls who work in the workshop just scan it on their phone and they can watch this video back on replay. Right. Enjoy the rest of your morning, guys, and look forward to seeing you in a few months' time.